The most dangerous lies are not the ones strangers tell you. They are the truths your own mind quietly buries until one ordinary day forces them back into the light. I had boarded Flight 482 from Chicago to Seattle expecting nothing more exciting than catching up on sleep after 3 exhausting days at a cybersecurity conference. My laptop bag rested beneath the seat in front of me. My phone buzzed with a cheerful message from my wife asking if I wanted homemade lasagna for dinner, and the man across the aisle was already snoring before the plane even reached cruising altitude. Everything about the afternoon felt perfectly ordinary. I answered my wife's text with a smile, telling her I would be home before 7 if the weather cooperated. She replied with a heart emoji and reminded me to drive carefully from the airport. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and thought about how good it would feel to spend the weekend without checking another security report or attending another meeting. A few minutes later, someone settled into the empty seat beside me. I barely looked up until I noticed that she had been quietly studying my face for several seconds. She appeared to be in her mid-30s with shoulder-length chestnut hair, kind blue eyes, and a calm expression that somehow felt familiar even though I was certain we had never met. I offered the polite smile Americans often exchange with strangers before returning my attention to the safety card in the seat pocket. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Daniel Carter?" I looked back at her, surprised but not alarmed. My conference badge was still clipped to my backpack, making the answer obvious. "Yes," I replied. "Have we met somewhere?" She held my gaze for a long moment before slowly shaking her head. "Not the way you remember." I laughed awkwardly, assuming she was making a joke that I simply did not understand. "I am sorry," I said. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Instead of correcting herself, she reached into her purse and carefully removed a folded piece of paper. She did not open it. She simply rested it in her lap, as though she had rehearsed this moment countless times. There was no panic. In her voice, no strange excitement, no sign that she wanted anything from me. She looked relieved, almost grateful, as if finding me had ended a very long search. "I have been looking for you for 3 years," she said quietly. My smile disappeared. "I think there has been a mistake." She shook her head once more. "No, Daniel. There has been a mistake. Just not the one you think." My pulse quickened, although I could not explain why. I searched my memory for her face, her voice, anything that might connect us, but there was absolutely nothing. I glanced toward the aisle, wondering whether I should politely end the conversation, yet something about her calm confidence kept me in my seat. She looked out the window for a moment, took a slow breath, and turned back toward me with tears beginning to gather in her eyes. Then she spoke the single sentence that shattered every ordinary thought I had carried onto that airplane. "Daniel," she whispered, "I am your wife." For several long seconds, I simply stared at her, waiting for the smile that would reveal this was some elaborate misunderstanding. It never came. Her expression remained calm, patient, and strangely sympathetic, as though she understood exactly how impossible her words sounded. I instinctively glanced at the wedding band on my left hand before pulling my phone from my pocket. The lock screen displayed the smiling face of my wife standing beside me during our vacation along the Oregon coast only 6 months earlier. I held the phone up without saying a word. "This is my wife," I finally said. "We have been married for 4 years." The woman beside me looked at the photograph with gentle eyes and nodded slowly. "Yes," she answered quietly. "I know who she is." That response unsettled me far more than anything she had said before. "Then why would you tell me something like this?" I asked. She folded her hands together in her lap. "Because once, before everything changed, I was your wife too." My pulse began to race. I forced a nervous laugh and leaned back in my seat. "You must have the wrong person." She shook her head. "Daniel, your grandmother used to call you Danny Bear until you turned 12 because you hated vegetables, but never refused blueberry pancakes." My smile disappeared. I had never shared that nickname with anyone outside my family. "You fractured your left wrist falling out of a maple tree when you were 10 years old. The scar is almost invisible now, but you still rub it whenever you are nervous." Without thinking, my fingers instinctively touched the faint scar near my wrist. She noticed the movement, but said nothing. I felt my mouth go dry. "Your father taught you to drive in an old green pickup truck that stalled every few miles, and every time the engine died, he joked that the truck just wanted another coffee break." I stared at her in complete silence. My father had passed away years earlier. That story had never appeared online, and I had not even mentioned it during the conference. She continued speaking in the same calm voice, never raising her volume, never sounding rehearsed. Every morning you stir exactly 1 packet of sugar into your coffee before tasting it, even when you promise yourself you are cutting back. You always read the last page of a mystery novel before starting the first chapter because you say knowing the ending helps you notice the clues. I slowly lowered my coffee cup. She was right. Every detail was right. "Who are you?" I whispered. She looked out the airplane window for a brief moment before answering. "My name is Olivia Bennett." The name meant absolutely nothing to me. I searched every corner of my memory, but found only emptiness. "I do not know you," I said quietly. "I believe you," she replied. "That is exactly what I expected you to say." The engines hummed steadily as the airplane crossed above endless clouds, yet the cabin suddenly felt much smaller than before. I looked around at the other passengers reading books, watching movies, or sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that my entire understanding of my own life was beginning to collapse. Olivia reached into her purse once again, carefully removing a small folded road map that had clearly been used many times. She opened it just enough to reveal a blue circle drawn around one location. Then she gently turned it toward me. Printed beside the circle were 2 simple words that sent an unexplainable chill through my entire body. "Silver Lake." "Tell me honestly," she said softly. "If you have never been there, then why did you ask me to meet you there every anniversary?" My mind refused to accept what I had just heard, yet my eyes remained fixed on the blue circle surrounding Silver Lake. The name meant nothing to me, but something deeper than memory stirred quietly beneath the surface, like a song I almost recognized without being able to hear the melody. I slowly pushed the folded map back toward Olivia. "I have never been there," I said as confidently as I could. She did not argue. She simply nodded with quiet understanding. "That is what you believe," she answered. "I know how convincing missing memories can be." I rubbed my forehead, trying to slow the racing thoughts inside my head. "If you really knew me, then tell me something that can actually prove this. Not stories, not childhood memories, real evidence." Olivia looked at me for a long moment before reaching into her leather handbag once again. This time she carefully removed a worn white envelope with softened corners, as though it had been opened and closed countless times over the years. She hesitated briefly before placing it gently into my hands. "Open it," she whispered. My fingers felt unusually heavy as I slid the photographs from inside the envelope. The first picture showed a small lakeside cabin surrounded by tall pine trees beneath a bright summer sky. Standing on the wooden dock were 2 people smiling at the camera. One of them was unmistakably me. The other was Olivia. I studied every detail of my own face. The smile looked genuine. My arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. Matching wedding bands reflected the afternoon sunlight. Nothing about the photograph appeared manipulated or artificial. I quickly turned it over. Written across the back in neat blue ink were words that instantly made my heart pound. "Forever begins beside the water. Love, Daniel." I stared at the handwriting. Every curve of every letter matched my own. I had spent years signing reports, contracts, birthday cards, and handwritten notes. I knew my handwriting better than anyone. This was mine. "That cannot be real," I whispered, although I no longer believed the words myself. Olivia quietly handed me another photograph. This one showed the same cabin during winter. Snow covered the roof while I stood outside carrying a stack of firewood. Olivia laughed at something beyond the edge of the frame. Once again, both of us wore wedding rings. On the back, another handwritten sentence appeared in the same familiar script. "Every season feels like home because you are here." I swallowed hard. My breathing had become noticeably slower, not because I was calmer, but because I felt afraid to inhale too quickly. "Photographs can be edited," I finally managed to say. Olivia nodded. "That is true." She reached into her bag one final time and carefully placed a small black flash drive into my open palm. A white label covered one side. Written across it in permanent marker were 6 simple words. "For Daniel. Only if you forgot." My pulse quickened again. "What is this?" I asked. Olivia looked directly into my eyes. Her expression filled not with triumph, but with quiet sadness. "You recorded it yourself," she said. "The night before everything changed." I searched her face for the slightest sign of deception, but found only sincerity. Around us, the flight attendants calmly rolled beverage carts through the aisle, while passengers continued reading magazines and watching movies, completely unaware that the ordinary flight around them had become the dividing line between two completely different versions of my life. Olivia gently folded her hands together again before speaking the sentence that left me unable to look away from the flash drive resting in my trembling hand. You told me that if you ever forgot our life together, this recording would explain why you chose to let it happen. The flash drive felt surprisingly light in my hand, yet it carried more weight than anything I had ever held. I turned it over several times, tracing the handwritten label with my thumb as though touching the words might somehow unlock memories hidden somewhere inside my mind. The handwriting was undeniably mine. Every letter leaned slightly to the right, exactly as it always had whenever I wrote in a hurry. I wanted to dismiss it as an elaborate forgery, but too many impossible details had already pushed that explanation beyond reason. Why would I record something like this? I asked quietly. Olivia did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked out through the airplane window where endless white clouds drifted beneath us. Because you knew there was a chance this day would come, she finally replied. You wanted your future self to hear the truth from the only person you believed would never lie to you. My phone vibrated again. Another message from my wife appeared on the screen. She had sent a photograph of the lasagna cooling on the kitchen counter along with the words, "Dinner will be ready when you get home. Love you." I stared at the message for several seconds before locking the screen. The warmth in that simple text was real. My marriage was real. Nothing about my life with her had ever felt false. I looked back at Olivia. I love my wife, I said firmly. I believe you do, she answered without hesitation. I have never questioned that. Her response caught me completely off guard. There was no bitterness in her voice. No anger. No jealousy. Only quiet acceptance. Then what do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, she said softly. I promised I would not ask you to choose. My confusion deepened. Then why tell me any of this? Olivia slowly reached into her bag once more and removed a folded legal document protected inside a transparent sleeve. She carefully handed it to me. Across the top, I read the words warranty deed. My eyes moved lower until they stopped on the property description. Silver Lake Cabin. Beneath that were two names listed as joint owners. Daniel Carter. Olivia Bennett. I read the document 3 times before looking up again. This has to be fake. Look at the notarization date, she said gently. I did. It was dated almost 3 years before my wedding to my current wife. My stomach tightened. I have never signed this. You did, Olivia replied. You just cannot remember. I searched the signature line. The signature matched every legal document I had signed throughout my adult life. Every loop, every stroke, every slight flourish beneath the last letter belonged to me. My thoughts became increasingly difficult to organize. 3 years, I whispered to myself. What happened 3 years ago? Olivia lowered her eyes before answering. That is the part you asked me not to explain until you watched the recording. I slipped the deed back into its protective sleeve and returned it to her with shaking hands. The engines hummed steadily while the captain announced that we would begin our descent into Seattle in about 30 minutes. Around us, passengers calmly prepared for landing, completely unaware that my entire past had begun to unravel somewhere above the clouds. Olivia carefully placed the flash drive back into my hand instead of returning it to her bag. Do not watch it on the airplane, she said. Go home. Be alone. Then let your own voice tell you what your memory no longer can. Before I could ask another question, she quietly added the one sentence that made the approaching landing feel far more frightening than reassuring. The hardest part is not discovering what you forgot, Daniel. The hardest part is learning that forgetting was your own decision. By the time the airplane touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, I felt as though I had lived an entire lifetime between takeoff and landing. The familiar sound of the wheels meeting the runway usually brought relief after a long flight. But this time it only reminded me that whatever happened next would take place in the real world. The passengers around us reached for their bags, switched on their phones, and hurried to stand before the seatbelt sign disappeared. Everything looked completely normal, yet nothing inside me felt ordinary anymore. I slipped the flash drive into my jacket pocket without another word. Olivia stood only after everyone else had begun moving toward the aisle. She never reached for my arm or asked me to follow her. Instead, She offered a quiet smile that somehow carried both hope and sadness. You once told me that truth should never be forced, she said softly. So I will let you find it at your own pace. Before I could respond, she removed a small folded note from her purse and placed it in my hand. Do not open this unless you watch the recording first. Then she picked up her carry-on suitcase and disappeared into the slow-moving crowd without looking back. I remained standing near my seat for several moments, watching until I could no longer see her. When I finally reached baggage claim, my phone rang. It was my wife. Hearing her voice immediately grounded me. She laughed as she asked whether my flight had been smooth and reminded me that dinner was waiting. I answered as naturally as I could, hiding the uncertainty growing inside me. During the drive home, the flash drive seemed to weigh heavier with every passing mile. More than once I considered rolling down the window and throwing it into the nearest trash can at a gas station. If I destroyed it, everything could return to normal. My life would remain exactly as it had been that morning. Yet every impossible detail Olivia had shared continued replaying inside my head. The nickname from my childhood, my father's old truck, the scar on my wrist, the photographs, the deed. None of it should have existed. When I arrived home, the familiar scent of baked lasagna filled the house. My wife greeted me with a warm hug and asked about the conference. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and answered every question as though nothing had happened. The evening unfolded exactly as countless evenings had before. We cleared the dishes together, watched half of a television show, and laughed at a joke neither of us would remember next week. Looking at her, I felt genuine love, genuine comfort, and genuine gratitude. Whatever mystery surrounded my past could not erase the happiness we had built together. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, I quietly walked downstairs carrying only the flash drive. My home office was silent except for the faint hum of my computer. I locked the door, inserted the drive into my desktop, and waited. A single video file appeared on the screen. There were no family photos, no folders, no documents. Only one recording labeled simply, "Watch this alone." My hand hovered above the mouse for several seconds before I finally clicked. The screen remained black for a moment. Then a familiar face slowly appeared. It was mine. I looked tired, thinner than I remembered ever being, with dark circles beneath my eyes. But there was no doubt I was staring at myself. The man on the screen looked directly into the camera, took a slow breath, and spoke the words that instantly sent a chill through my entire body. If you are watching this, Daniel, the treatment worked, and you no longer remember the woman you loved enough to ask her to disappear. For several seconds I could not breathe. The man on the screen was me in every possible way, yet his eyes carried a quiet exhaustion I had never seen in the mirror. He looked directly into the camera as though he knew exactly when I would someday watch the recording. Before you panic, he said calmly, I need you to understand one thing. No one betrayed you. No one lied to you. Everything that happened was your decision. I instinctively leaned closer to the monitor. My own voice sounded steady, almost comforting, even though every sentence left me feeling less certain about my own life. If this recording exists, then the neurological treatment was successful. The doctors warned us that the damaged memories might disappear completely, and I accepted that risk. I paused the video for a moment, pressing both hands against the edge of my desk. Neurological treatment. The word sounded strangely familiar. I hurried to the filing cabinet in the corner of my office where I kept years of medical records, insurance forms, and tax documents. After several minutes of searching, I found a thick folder dated almost 4 years earlier. Inside were hospital discharge papers, specialist referrals, and neurological evaluations from a medical center in Chicago. My eyes moved quickly through page after page until one sentence stopped me cold. Experimental memory preservation protocol. Possible long-term autobiographical memory loss. I stared at the words, unable to remember ever reading them before. My signature appeared at the bottom of every consent form. I returned to the computer and pressed play again. The man on the screen smiled sadly. I know exactly what you are doing right now. You are probably searching for proof because that is what we always do when something does not make sense. He gave a small laugh that sounded painfully familiar. You are about to discover that every document is real. I felt an uncomfortable chill. It was as though my past self had anticipated every reaction I would have. You are wondering about Olivia, he continued. Yes, you loved her. more deeply than I can explain in a single recording. We built a beautiful life together. We bought a cabin beside Silver Lake because we believed every anniversary deserved to begin with sunrise over the water. A lump formed in my throat. The cabin from the photographs suddenly seemed less like impossible evidence and more like a place waiting quietly beyond the reach of my memory. Then I became sick. My recorded voice continued. The condition was treatable, but the treatment carried a serious risk. The doctors could not guarantee which memories would survive. I had to choose between protecting my memories or protecting my future. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to imagine making such a decision. Olivia wanted me to keep fighting even if it meant losing everything we shared. She told me that being alive mattered more than remembering every chapter of our life together. Tears filled the eyes of the man on the screen before he smiled again. If you are watching this, then she kept her promise. My heartbeat slowed as another impossible realization settled over me. Olivia had never asked me to leave my current life. She had never demanded explanations or forgiveness. She had simply carried the truth exactly as I had instructed her. The recording continued for another few quiet seconds before my past self lowered his voice and revealed the one detail I had never expected to hear. There is one more thing I have hidden from you because you were never supposed to discover it until now. After the treatment, your life did not begin again. It continued, and someone else helped you build the future that I knew I might never remember. The recording remained silent for several seconds after those words, giving me enough time to absorb the impossible. Reality unfolding before me. I could no longer pretend that Olivia had invented an elaborate story or manipulated old documents. Every piece fit together too perfectly, and every answer only led to a deeper truth. My past self looked into the camera with the same thoughtful expression I often saw when preparing for a difficult decision. If you are struggling to understand how you could love two different people without betraying either of them, listen carefully, he said. Life did not replace one love with another. Life simply continued after tragedy rewrote the story. I felt my chest tighten as I watched my own face explain emotions I could not yet remember. After the treatment, I survived, but I lost almost everything that connected me to Olivia. I could recognize my own name, my work, and much of my childhood, but our marriage disappeared from my mind. The doctors warned us that forcing forgotten memories to return could do more harm than good. Olivia accepted that before I ever did. I remembered the calm sadness in her eyes on the airplane. She had never tried to convince me through guilt. She had only offered the truth. The man on the screen continued. Months later, someone extraordinary entered your life. Her name is Claire. Hearing my wife's name spoken by my own recorded voice sent another wave of disbelief through me. She met you after the treatment. She never knew the man who existed before. She only knew the man trying to rebuild his future one ordinary day at a time. She loved that man completely. Tears filled my eyes before I even realized they had formed. Claire is not living someone else's life. The recording continued. She helped create a new one. Never allow yourself to believe that your happiness with her is false. It is just as real as everything Olivia and I shared. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the compassion in my own words. There was no bitterness toward either woman. No regret. Only gratitude. You are probably wondering whether Claire knows the truth, my past self said. Yes, she knows everything. I froze. I told her before we married. I showed her our photographs, our records, and this very recording. She cried for Olivia before she ever cried for herself. Then she made me one promise. She said that if I ever accidentally discovered the truth, she would never stand between me and the answers. My hands began to tremble. Claire had lived beside me for years carrying a secret I never imagined existed, yet she had never allowed it to change the kindness she showed me every single day. The recording was no longer exposing deception. It was revealing extraordinary loyalty from everyone involved. My past self smiled gently, almost as though he felt relieved that the hardest part had finally been spoken aloud. If you have reached this point, then there is only one thing left for you to do. Do not search for missing memories. Search for understanding instead. Memories belong to the past, but character belongs to the present. He paused one final time before adding, there is one place where every chapter of our life still exists exactly as we left it. I asked that nothing be changed, no matter how many years passed. My heartbeat quickened once again as he slowly lifted a small brass key toward the camera. Inside the cabin at Silver Lake, beneath the loose floorboard beside the fireplace, you will find the last thing I ever prepared for you. And only after you see it will you understand why every person in your life chose love over possession. I did not sleep that night. Before sunrise, I quietly left the house, telling Claire that I wanted to take a long drive to clear my head after the conference. She smiled gently, wished me a safe trip, and kissed my cheek with the same warmth she had shown me every day for years. As I pulled away from our driveway, I caught myself wondering how many mornings she had carried the weight of my forgotten past without ever allowing it to steal the happiness we had built together. Nearly 3 hours later, the highway narrowed into a winding two-lane road surrounded by towering pine trees. When I saw the weathered wooden sign that read Silver Lake, an unexpected feeling settled over me. It was not recognition exactly. It was comfort, as though some forgotten part of me had been quietly waiting for my return. The lake reflected the clear morning sky, and gentle ripples moved across the water with the same peaceful rhythm shown in the photographs. I followed a gravel driveway until the small cabin appeared between the trees. The moment I stepped out of my car, the scent of pine and fresh lake air filled my lungs, carrying with it an emotion that had no memory attached to it. My heart ached with familiarity, even though my mind remained empty. Olivia was already waiting on the front porch. She stood without speaking as I approached. Neither of us knew exactly what to say. Finally, I broke the silence. I watched the recording. She nodded slowly. Then I kept my promise. I looked into her eyes and realized that every difficult decision she had made had been for someone else's happiness rather than her own. I am sorry that I cannot remember, I said quietly. She offered a small smile filled with kindness instead of disappointment. You apologized for that years ago, before any of this happened. I never blamed you then, and I do not blame you now. Together we walked inside the cabin. Nothing seemed abandoned. Dust covered a few shelves, but the furniture remained exactly where it appeared in the photographs. Framed pictures still rested on the mantel above the fireplace. I studied them carefully. Every image showed two people sharing an ordinary life filled with simple moments rather than dramatic adventures. Morning coffee on the porch, a fishing trip, decorating a Christmas tree, watching fireworks beside the lake. I could not remember living those days, yet I could clearly see that whoever I had been was genuinely happy. Olivia knelt beside the old stone fireplace and gently pressed against one loose floorboard. It lifted easily. Beneath it rested a small wooden box. She stepped back without touching it again. You asked me never to open it, she said softly. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside rested 2 wedding rings, a stack of handwritten letters tied together with blue ribbon, and another envelope with my name written across the front in my own handwriting. Beneath the envelope lay a single folded sheet of paper. I opened it carefully. It contained only one sentence. If you are reading this beside Olivia, then both of you honored every promise we made. I lowered the paper, unable to speak. Olivia quietly removed one of the rings from the box and placed it in my palm. You gave this to me the day we married, she whispered. Today I am giving it back, not because I want you to wear it again, but because I promised that one day it would return to the man who taught me that real love is measured by what we are willing to let go of, not by what we try to keep. Olivia and I remained on the porch until the afternoon sunlight slowly drifted across the surface of Silver Lake. Neither of us tried to force conversations about memories that no longer existed. Instead, we spoke about ordinary things, the changing seasons around the cabin, the family of ducks that returned every spring, and the old wooden dock that I had insisted on repairing myself every summer according to the stories preserved inside the letters. Listening to her, I realized something that surprised me. I did not need my memories to recognize the kind of person I had once been. That man still existed inside the choices he had made for the people he loved. Before I left, Olivia handed me the bundle of letters. These belong to you now, she said. You wrote every one of them for different moments that you thought might come someday. Read them only when you feel ready. I thanked her, slipped the letters into my bag beside the wedding ring, and took one last look at the peaceful cabin before beginning the drive home. During the long trip back to Seattle, I did not search for forgotten images inside my mind anymore. Instead, I thought about the extraordinary kindness that had surrounded me without my ever knowing it. Olivia had protected my future by honoring a painful promise. My past self had accepted an impossible sacrifice to preserve my life. And Claire had quietly loved a man whose story she understood better than he ever could. When I pulled into the driveway just before sunset, Claire was already waiting on the front porch. She looked at me carefully, not with fear, but with gentle concern. Before she could speak, I walked toward her and wrapped my arms around her. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, I stepped back and asked the question that had been waiting inside me since the recording. You knew everything, did not you? She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. From the very beginning, she whispered. I promised him that if this day ever came, I would let you find the truth without making you choose between your past and your present. I reached into my bag and showed her the old wedding ring resting in my palm. She looked at it for several quiet seconds before gently closing my fingers around it again. Keep it, she said softly. It is part of your story. It does not threaten ours. In that moment, I understood something my past self had tried to teach me. Love was never a competition between memories. It was the courage to honor every chapter that had shaped a life, even the ones that no longer remained in conscious thought. A few weeks later, Claire and I returned to Silver Lake together. Olivia met us there one final time. We shared lunch on the porch, laughed over stories preserved in the letters, and watched the afternoon sunlight dance across the water. There were still no returning memories, no miraculous recovery, and no dramatic revelation waiting at the end of the road. Instead, there was peace. Before leaving, Olivia smiled and quietly said that she no longer needed to come back because every promise had finally been fulfilled. As Claire and I drove away, I looked into the rearview mirror until the cabin disappeared behind the pine trees. I realized that I had not recovered the life I had forgotten, but I had gained something equally valuable. I had learned that the strongest memories are not always the ones our minds keep. Sometimes they are the acts of compassion that continue shaping our lives long after the details have faded away, proving that the deepest kind of love is never measured by possession, but by the grace to let another person move forward with gratitude, hope, and an open heart.